You've probably heard the phrase, "We're all immigrants," or "All Australians are immigrants," many times. It gets thrown around by lefties on TV, in classrooms, and across social media as if it's a proven fact. And it's used to try and shut down any debate about immigration, culture, or who is really Australian. But that phrase is a myth. It's not accurate legally, historically, or nationally. And today we're going to break it down and show why not all Australians are simply immigrants.
To support us, consider becoming a YouTube channel member or Patreon, or check out our merch, links in the description below.
Let's start with the definition. According to the Oxford Dictionary, an immigrant is a person who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. Think about that carefully. To be an immigrant, you must move into a country that already exists. You're entering another nation, one that already has established sovereignty, borders, and law. That's how immigration works today. A family from India moves to Britain, immigrants. A person from China moves to Australia in 2025, immigrants. But here's the key. When the British first arrived in 1788, there was no Australia as a country. There was Indigenous tribes living on this land, yes, which were diverse groups with their own cultures and languages, but there was no unified state, no national border, no infrastructure, and no legal sovereignty over the continent. By international law of the time, the doctrine of Terra Nullius, the land was legally deemed as unclaimed. So when the first fleet landed, they didn't immigrate into an existing nation. They settled, founded, built, and eventually created a new one. This is where the myth completely breaks down. The men and women who came here in 1788 weren't immigrants moving into an already established Australia. They were settlers. They brought with them the institutions of Britain of the time, which was a legal system based on English common law and Christianity, a system of governance with courts, parliaments, and eventually federation, and a Christian moral framework shaping schools, hospitals, communities, and general life. They didn't come as guests, they came as founders. They built farms, towns, railways, and eventually cities. They defended the new colony, raised families, and created the national identity that carried into the 20th century, the one that is being wiped away and trying to be taken away from us. So when people say, "We're all immigrants," it's not just inaccurate, it's firstly extremely low IQ, but also it erases the reality that European Christian settlement established Australia as a country. Critics often claim that settlement was illegal, that Australia was stolen, and therefore everyone is just an immigrant squatting on Indigenous land. But once again, that is not what international law said at the time. The doctrine of Terra Nullius, Latin for land belonging to no one, was a widely accepted legal principle active in the 18th century. It didn't mean the land was empty of people. It meant the land had no unified sovereignty and no recognized state that held legal ownership under the law of nations. Britain applied this doctrine when declaring sovereignty over Australia in 1788, and whether people today agree with it or not, under the law of the time, this was a legal settlement. And like the video if you're enjoying it so far. Fast forward to 1992. The High Court of Australia in the Mabo case recognised the native title. But even then, the court explicitly rejected the idea that Australia was ever invaded. That matters. The nation was not founded through war with another state, but through settlement under the law of the era. So again, settlers were not immigrants. They didn't come into someone else's country. They built and made a country. From settlement, Australia grew into a federation in 1901. By then, the national identity was clear, overwhelmingly European, Christian, and rooted in British, Anglo-Saxon/Anglo-Celtic heritage. We know this by the writings and documents of the time, what the founding fathers or founding federators said, our early politicians and prime ministers, our laws and policies such as the White Australia policy, and also even by the 1901 census data that stated Australia was 98.5% white European and 96.1% Christian. Even in 1961, we were still 98.7% European and 87.4% Christian. Compared to recently, the 2021 census data, 70% European and 43% Christian, with today's estimate in 2025 as approximately 64% European and only 37% Christian. Our identity and heritage has literally been taken away from us. The institutions, parliament, education, and courts of this country back then were established not by immigrants, but by the descendants of settlers. The culture, mateship, hard work, sacrifice in war was built not by outsiders moving into an existing nation, but by the pioneers who created it and their families. When Australians fought in Gallipoli and on the Western Front, they didn't fight as immigrants. They fought as Australians, members of a sovereign nation forged by settlement and hard work building an amazing nation from scratch. This is why the phrase, "we're all immigrants," is such a distortion. It collapses the difference between founders and newcomers, between the people who built a country, the white Europeans, once again mainly Anglo-Saxon/Celtic, and those from a different background who moved in later. So why does this myth keep being repeated? Well, it's because politically it's useful for them. It's useful to shut down any debate about immigration, make Australians feel like questioning mass immigration is hypocritical, and to reframe the founding of Australia as just another wave of immigration rather than the creation of a sovereign nation. In short, it's a tool for guilt and for silencing dissent. If everyone's an immigrant, then nobody has a greater claim to the land or culture. And if nobody has a claim, then the nation has no foundation. So that means they can keep destroying and changing our country without any pushback. This isn't just an academic debate, it shapes our national identity right now. If Australians see themselves only as immigrants, then there's no anchor, no shared heritage or identity, no recognition of the sacrifices that the settlers, our ancestors, and our people made to build this country under law, war, fight, and literal death for it in the Great Wars to hand it down to us through generations. But if we remember that we are a settled, sovereign nation founded by European Christians under the laws of the time, then we see immigration in its proper place, as something that happens after a nation is built, not the foundation of the nation itself. This distinction is critical because without it, the story of Australia gets rewritten, and with it, our sense of who we are. So let's get the record straight. Australians are not all immigrants. Immigrants come into a country that already exists. The settlers of 1788 and their descendants did not immigrate into someone else's established country. They founded a new one for their people, under the law of the time, and it was legal. Through their faith, sacrifice, and work, it became sovereign. That doesn't mean history was perfect or that no mistakes were made, but it does mean that the phrase, "we're all immigrants," is extremely false historically, legally, and nationally. Australians are not just another wave of immigrants. We are the people whom our tribe, our people, Europeans, built and founded this country through settlement, defended in war, and handed down through the generations. And it's time we start telling that truth again. If you enjoyed this video, like and share it to help the videos reach. Consider checking out our merch or becoming a YouTube channel member or Patreon, links in the description, and check out one of the videos on screen now. God bless Australia, and Christ is King.